To Jeffrey, good morning. How are you?
Gentlemen, how are you?
Well, we've missed you, that's for sure. It's been a while since we've talked, and the Mariners have been busy since then, so we've got a lot to go through. You want to break down all their moves since we talked last?
Well, it's been great talking. Look forward to catching up at spring training.
They brought back Austin Shenton.
They did bring back Austin Shenton.
Yeah, exactly. What is going on, man? Why? Without just making fun here, why have they done nothing?
Here's what I'm going to do today, guys. This job, like, part of it is having the ability to try and be nimble and understand where the people who are listening to you are and trying to bring a little bit of balance to the world. So I could very easily come onto this show and say that Seattle Mariners ownership is blowing one of the great opportunities in Major League Baseball today, not in the franchise, just in Major League Baseball, by not looking at this window that they've got right now as a reason to be urgent and to go out and compliment this great pitching staff you have. I could do that, but there's no use in that right now. And here's why. Nothing any of us say is going to change the tack that ownership takes. I believe this to be true, and I believe it to be true because Mariners fans have been complaining about them having a lack of urgency for years and years and years now, and it's done absolutely nothing to change the behavior of the organization. So what I'm going to do instead is try and outline the closest possible way that the Mariners could be doing something right. Just to try and give a little bit of hope to the fans who are out there right now. Because let's not forget, Mike, there are multiple paths to right. You can go and sign a bunch of big-name free agents, and that is a right thing to do. But you can also go, if your ownership is coming at you and saying we are going to be cheap, and sign worthwhile players as we get into January and February and even potentially March, and enter next season as a better team than they were last year. So I'm not discounting that possibility. There's still a world in which that happens. And, as much energy as we want to expend just looking at this and saying, what is going on here? I don't know how worth it it's going to be for anyone involved.
So you have any names of those worthwhile, veteran, proven second baseman, first baseman, third baseman?
No, and the funny part about this, Brock, is that a lot of these guys are of the Colton Wong oeuvre, if you will, and they are of those mid-tier guys who just didn't work out. Now, mid-tier guys sometimes do work out. And that's what the Mariners, I think, are going to be hunting for over the next few weeks. In free agency, I'm not sure that there are really any of them out there. Just like second baseman and third baseman is what we're looking at. And so this seems to be more of a trade thing. And we've heard Nico Horner's name bounced around this winter. I don't know how realistic a possibility that is. We've heard Alec Boehm's name bounced around. We've heard Nolan Arenado's. I don't know what direction they actually go, and I don't think Arenado's particularly realistic at this point. So I wish I had names for you. I wish I had moves that they could and should and would make. Right now, it's just none of those things is very clear.
What we threw around three names yesterday. I think it was Bleacher Report or somebody like that had like a little projection of what the Mariners lineup could look like, and they had them adding three names to their current roster. It was Jose Iglesias, Ha-Sung Kim, and JD Martinez as a DH. What if they did those three things? What kind of team are you looking at?
better than the one they have right now.
No kidding.
The problem with I mean, Jose Iglesias is fine. You know, he puts the bat on the ball, and considering the organization that we're talking about here and their difficulty putting the bat on the ball, I'm Jose Iglesias. He's not going to be like a deep impact player, but he's a veteran and he handles the bat well. JD Martinez, like he has done nothing but produce. And, you know, when you have an outfield with Rosarena and Julio Rodriguez and Victor Robles that seems pretty set at this point, you wonder what that does to the Mitches, but neither of the Mitches, frankly, warranted the DH at bats that they got last year. And so I could see JD Martinez being a good addition to the team. And who was the third one?
Ha-Seong Kim.
Best player of the group, but he's an infielder who's coming off shoulder surgery, and there are real questions about that. And beyond that, I think he's going to cost too much money. Like the Mariners have like $15 million to work with, and here's the part where I think Mariners fans should ask themselves this question. Because I think this is a reasonable thing to ask. When we are sitting around waiting desperately for something to happen, do you think sometimes we trick ourselves into thinking that some action is better than no action when no action may actually be better than some? And what I mean is how much better is this team in 2025 without Luis Castillo?
I'm not a big trade Castillo guy, so I don't think that makes them better unless there's a really compelling, something coming back, obviously, right?
Yeah, well, either not just a compelling something coming back, but a compelling thing that you do with the money that you get.
Right.
And I don't know how many compelling things there are out there right now. And so I hate to say to Mariners fans, like, maybe the lack of action is better than action for action's sake. But the biggest question that I have right now about this organization is this. When we're looking at problems in our life, what do we try to isolate? We try to figure out what is in our control and what is out of our control. And the best thing you can do is ignore or not allow what's out of your control to affect you and just grab the reins of what you are controlling. The Mariners front office has no control over its budget. That comes from ownership. What the Mariners front office does control is baseball operations and trades and moving prospects. And I think the real question to ask right now about this franchise is if the ownership is going to be poor in terms of resources. And I think we can agree at this point that the ownership is poor in terms of resources devoted to this team right now in 2025. They are handcuffing this team. They are hindering this team. They are preventing this team from reaching its fullest potential. In that, though, with that being the case, against the backdrop of all that, should the Mariners front office be more open to trading some of its top prospects in order to go out and get some of the guys who would make them a better team in 2025 and beyond?
Well, if you're Jerry Dipoto, don't you have to? I mean, otherwise you're going to get fired.
I hate the idea of somebody doing a particular thing in order to avoid getting fired.
Sure.
Once we get into into moral hazard situations, Mike, that's when really bad.
Oh, I'm well aware.
Decisions get made,
but
man, there's this very interesting. The Mariners have such an interesting next 18 or so months. Through the end of the 2026 season, are they going to be able to bridge the gap between between their two windows, one that will be nearing its conclusion, and that's this pitching window, and the other that seems to be opening, which is the Colt Emerson, Cole Young, Laz Montez, Felnine Celestin, et cetera, like cadre, Johnny Farmelo cadre of bats coming up. Like, can those two somehow blend into something wonderful and special? And that's, with that an open question, I feel like the Mariners absolutely have to do something for this year if ownership is not going.
Okay, so what is it?
Yeah, and can I intervene here real quickly?
Sorry.
And just throw three names? I mean, and I think I know the answer to this because you've not mentioned them, but Alex Bregman's still out there. Santander is still out there. Pete Alonso is still out there. I mean, there are still impact players at first and third, and Santander probably could play first or DH. Is that just a no-go?
I think Santander probably less or so, and Alonso, I don't get why they're not in there. I mean, Luke Raley's a solid player. DH him. Put Pete Alonso up first. Let him hit bombs. That one to me makes all the sense.
How much does Alonso get? What's the market for Pete Alonso, Bregman, and Santander? Just give me a quick projection on what you think each of those three guys gets, roughly.
I think Alonso probably gets $30 million or so a year, 3 years, opt out after the first two.
Okay.
Maybe a little more than that. I think I can't tell on Bregman. Tough to say. I still think he's probably going to get a longer term deal. But it would not entirely shock me to see him, if this thing gets into February, go, one of those shorter deals like the Boris Ford did last year. I mean, it's either of those. It's like stretch. Let's stretch. Let's stretch for this guy. Let's go and get the power and get the home runs from Alonso, or let's get the contact, the on base, the glove, the leadership with Bregman. I mean, and I think it's a matter of waiting and hoping that guys get a little bit desperate and that you can come in at the end and get them under what you thought you were going to be able to. You're not paying retail for them at this point. And if the Mariners want to avoid paying retail and free agency, if that's like something that they're looking to do out of necessity, then man, waiting this long and pouncing when the opportunity is there seems like a real no-brainer.
Roki Sasaki. Have the Mariners had an interview with him, and do you think that is in any way in their plans?
I don't know if they've had an interview with him. I do not see that. I do not see them as being
suitors,
the team at the end of the day. Things change. Let's preface that. Like, things are changing all the time, but I do not believe the Mariners will be the final destination for Roki Sasaki.
How come?
I don't know why specifically, because the case that they have to make, pretty darn good one. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, nobody has developed young starting pitching as well as the Mariners have over the last 3 to 4 years. Because of their rotation depth, they have the ability to put them on a schedule where there's not a whole lot of pressure coming into year one. They can kind of Brian Woo them, and keep the arm healthy and prioritize that. But at the end of the day, I think it's likeliest to be Southern California or somewhere in California, and I think we will find out the reasons probably after he signs. It's the whole process up to this point has been very secretive and very covert, and I still don't know what's what yet.
No, go ahead, Salky.
Well, I'm just wondering what players are thinking about this. I mean, if you are a Mariners player,
they love it.
Well, no kidding. If you are Cal Raleigh, if you are Julio, if you are Kirby, if you are Logan Gilbert, I mean, take your pick. Scott Servais went on a world tour last offseason talking to all these guys in person to try to mend fences and clear the air. Scott's not here anymore. What do you think the reaction will be if we get to spring training here in a month and things don't look significantly different than they do today?
I'm less concerned if I'm a Mariners fan about the reaction from the players today as I am the consequence of this long term. If you're Cal Raleigh, why do you want to sign with this organization? If you're George Kirby and you're Logan Gilbert, why do you want to commit to an organization that's not willing to commit to others who are going to make you and your team better? I think it's a real question that Mariners ownership needs to ask itself. And it's not, guys, it's not like this is getting a whole lot better. They're going to have, let's look, after this year, between the Mitches, they're going to have $28 million coming off in salary, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does $28 million in free agency buy you now?
It buys
Luis Severino?
Almost 1 year of Pete Alonso.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I think my point is more. It's not going to buy you Kyle Tucker. And when you go shopping in free agency, this is the conundrum for the Mariners. When you go shopping in free agency, there tend to be two places where you can find the most impact. One is at the top of the market, where you're going to be paying $30+ million a year for a player. And if your budget is $170 million, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of where the Mariners is now and is expected to be going forward, that's a 50-year payroll right there. And most teams are not going to be willing to pony up that much money and put that much of their budget toward it. The other place you play is at the bottom of the market, where you can get some really good marginal value. If you sign a guy for cheap and he goes out and overperforms, and Victor Robles, I think, is a perfect example of that. But I just don't see free agency as being the Mariners' sandbox going forward. Mm-hmm. And that is a depressing reality.
Okay, well, but even if you accept that reality, let's accept that reality, because Jerry said over and over again, we're a draft, develop, and trade org. Okay, fine. Let's accept that reality. Why can't they make any trades? Why have they been unable to make trades? Why are they unable to move their prospects? Why did they misread the market for Luis Castillo? Why are they now at a spot where even if they want to trade Castillo, which they said they didn't want to do, and then apparently everyone in the world thinks they do want to do, the market for him isn't even what it once was.
I want to push back on one thing. Why do you say they have misread the market? How so?
Well, there doesn't seem to be a lot of takers for their prospects right now in terms of bringing back major league impact, and they've been unable to deal any of their pitchers if they wanted to go down that road. And in the meantime, most of the best fits for that pitching have acquired pitching somewhere else. So I'm not saying that they couldn't still trade Luis Castillo, but you can't tell me that.
This, I suppose, Mike, is where I think a little bit of patience is warranted. Just because they haven't crossed the finish line on a deal doesn't mean that the market for guys is bad, and it doesn't mean that they're necessarily overvaluing their guys. Sometimes there just aren't the right fits. But let's not forget. Did you see the report that came out a couple weeks ago on pitching injuries?
Mm-hmm.
Like Major League Baseball put together this whole thing. And when is the most common time for pitching injuries?
Spring training?
Correct.
Yeah, all right. There's some value to that, and if you have all 5 your pitchers, maybe especially someone like Emerson Hancock who goes up in value in spring training, who'd be a good fit for someone.
I think it's more like a Castillo. Maybe value would potentially go.
But if the whole point of trading Castillo is you're trying to save the money's not as valuable to you in spring training as it is earlier in the year. Why am I going to trade Luis Castillo if I'm not trying to save money?
It's not about saving money at that point. It's about acquiring guys who are making money already. That's all. It opens up the ability to go out and trade for guys who are making money. And right now, trading for guys who aren't making money is a really, really difficult proposition.
I guess the point I would make there, Jeff, is if you're going to say you're a draft, develop, and trade organization, to say the deal just isn't
trade.
Right. You can't say, well, the deal wasn't there. Deal has to be there.
Right.
Well, I mean, you've got to make the deal if that's what you are. Because now, you don't have a first, second, or third baseman.
You don't think Rayleigh's a first baseman?
Not every day. Can't hit lefties.
No.
So right now, you're looking at Luke Raley and Tyler Locklear. You're looking at Dylan Moore and Ryan Bliss, and you're looking at probably either
Mike
Austin
Salk.
Shenton or Rivas playing third base every day.
Yeah.
That's a Tacoma infield, especially knowing that J.P. Crawford had a god-awful year last year.
You're on a run. Keep going.
I mean, I'm frustrated, and honestly, Jeff, it leads me to wonder whether there was a real plan going into this offseason. Jerry doesn't talk as much as he used to, so we don't get to hear as much of what the plan is. I've never wondered before whether or not there was a plan. It always seemed like there was. Right now, it feels like either we can't see the plan that's going to develop really late. 2, they have a plan and it's been the wrong plan. It's been stymied at every single available option has gone somewhere else. Hey, we want Gavin Lux. Well, he's going to go somewhere else. Hey, we want this guy. He's going to go somewhere else. Or there's no real plan. And it's just a scattershot approach that doesn't have any real congruence to it.
Brock, you were about to say something.
Well, we chatted last hour, and I'm just curious if there's a narrative issue. Kind of like back to the old days of college athletics and recruiting and how important that is. Is there just, and we know how hard it is when a narrative is set and gets set. We see with our quarterback here in this town, like just to break a narrative is nearly impossible to do. I guess that would be my last question.
And what's the narrative here that they're having a tough time breaking?
Can't hit.
And players don't want to come here, right?
Won't pay. Players in free agency don't answer the call. But there's just a narrative that has been built here that's hard to break.
I don't think this is a narrative thing. I think this is I want to address what Mike said a little bit earlier, because I think it's a very reasonable and interesting point that if you are going to cast yourself as a draft, develop, and trade team, and you are essentially closing the window on impact free agents, you cannot treat trades as if they have to be wins. Sometimes you have to, if not lose a trade, be willing to get less back in value in order to actually consummate the deal. And if there is a clear criticism of the Mariners front office this winter to this point, and I am not, by the way, I'm not closing the door on what the front office can and will do yet, because there are a lot of big leaguers who are still available, like beyond Bregman and Alonso. Jack Flaherty's out there, Nick Pavetta's out there, Tanner Scott, Dirksen Profar, Carlos Estevez, Kirby Yates. Like, there's some real guys out there, some real impact type guys. So not closing the door yet on their offseason. But if we get to spring training and we're into spring training and that infield looks like you just said it does, Mike, then this has been a failure in all regards.
Let me ask you
end of story.
One last thing. I need like a 30-second answer because we're super late, and I'm sure you got to run as well. But this came from a texter, so I will just throw it out to you. Texter says, if Salk is correct, which would be a shock, and there will be a long, drawn-out lockout in 2026, really I think it would be 27, Owners want a salary cap. Why would any owner want to give out a free agent deal that will be out of date in 2 years?
There's not going to be a salary cap.
I'm not convinced you're right about that. I know you know more than I do, but I'm still not convinced you're right.
If there is a salary cap, Mike, it is going to come after 2 years of there being no baseball.
I think that's I honestly think what's happened with the RSNs is going to be such a massive problem for the next CBA that there is going to, I don't know if it's going to be 2 years, but there is going to be an extended lockout. I think it's going to be a giant fight.
How Mariners would it be, by the way, for them to have like this incredible core that is reaching its apex, and then it's just like, bye-bye, baseball.
By the time they come back, those guys are like 30. It's like, oh, darn. We missed another one
By
now.
the time they come back, Gilbert's a free agent, Kirby's a free agent, Randy's a free agent, Cal's a free agent.
Colt Emerson's decided to go play football. Yeah, all right. Anyway, Jeff, thanks for providing sunshine and hope. We'll talk to you soon. Look, the one thing I'm looking forward to more than anything with baseball season is our weekly chat. So good to catch up, man. We'll do it soon.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Boys, always a pleasure.